Mike has his own computer up here, so I'm going to make sure I read this properly. How was everyone's break? Woo! Breaks. Okay. Mike Monteiro. Okay, also needs no introduction. Mike Monteiro, the co-founder and the design director of Mule Design. He prefers that designers have strong spines. If you follow him on Twitter, you know he has the strongest of spines. We all aspire to having spines as strong as Mike. Enough about spines. Mike has written 2 books on the topic of design, Design is a Job, and You're My Favorite Client. He had a talk early on that we all followed in the design community called Fuck You, Pay Me, which was really wonderful. And he's been given awards like Conference Talk of the Year. I don't want to preface it any further, so I'm going to bring him up. Please welcome to the stage, Mike Monteiro.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Mike Monteiro, and I am an immigrant living in Donald Trump's fascist America. On September 23rd, 2017, Donald Trump declared war on North Korea. It was 8 p.m. He'd just eaten dinner, probably a couple cheeseburgers, fries, Coke, or maybe something that came in a big bowl of failure from KFC. He was probably watching Fox News as he did this. So he's getting angry. His arteries are clogging up. And he finally gets angry enough to take a shit. Because he can only shit when he's angry. You know this is true. And if he's shitting, he's tweeting. So he tweets out, let's go, declaration of war to North Korea. And if you're wondering whether I'm exaggerating by calling it a declaration of war, let me assure you, the North Koreans were not. The North Koreans called it a declaration of war. And they, in turn, threatened to start shooting down U.S. bombers. Now, of course, once the North Koreans and the Americans start going at it, Russia gets involved, China gets involved, you guys somehow get involved, other countries get involved, and somewhere down the line, you and I get fucked. We get blown up. An American president, while taking a cheeseburger shit, used Twitter to threaten a foreign country with nuclear annihilation. Luckily for us, luckily, Twitter's CEO, Jack Dorsey, he was on it. He was on it. He took a look at Twitter's rules and policies. He compared them to Trump's tweet. He made a very methodical list of which rules a nuclear threat was breaking. It turns out it's almost all of them. And he then did what he would have done with any other user behaving badly on his platform. He suspended Trump's account. He behaved ethically, he moved quickly, he showed great resolve, and he exhibited the kind of leadership qualities we need from someone in his position. No, son, you fucking did not. He did none of these things. He hid. A U.S. president used his platform to declare war on another country, to threaten the citizens of another country with nuclear annihilation, violating all of the platform rules and regulations in the process. And Jack Dorsey did nothing. He said nothing. On September 25th, 48 hours after the initial Trump tweet, Twitter co-founder Biz Stone finally addressed the issue in a tepidly written piece on Medium. And look, you can feel the leadership just jumping off the page when it starts with, "These are not my words." Every great document in history. It's true. Oh, Moby Dick, page 1. These are not my words. But here's the most important sentence of this letter. This has long been internal policy. That's Biz. This has long been internal policy and will soon update our public-facing rules to reflect it. This has long been internal policy and will soon update our public-facing rules to reflect it. There were always a different set of rules. We just didn't tell you. And that's immediately followed by a promise to remain transparent. There are always a different set of rules. We just didn't tell you. Now, some Americans have always understood that there were a different set of rules. A lot of Americans are finding that out recently. It's almost a throwaway line, but it holds a very important key to Twitter's thinking. In short, we'll move the goalposts accordingly. Twitter is updating their policy on the fly to explicitly avoid banning Trump. They've done it in the past, and they're going to continue to do so. And at the same time, they'll tell you that he's held to the same rules as every other user. Now, after reading Biz's piece on Medium, I told him, "Biz, this sounds hollow." Actually, to be completely transparent myself, I told him it was 100% bullshit. And his reply to me, "Mike, this is the hardest time to stick to principles. The easy way out would be to ban. That sets a precedent of subjectivity. Changing the rules," I know, laugh, because it's funny. Also, he really does look like a porg, am I right? Like, I nailed it with that porg. I know, we're talking about nuclear war, it's funny. Changing the rules to fit the situation is the exact opposite of principles and the exact meaning of subjectivity, and it's cowardly, it's opportunistic. They're updating their policy on the fly to explicitly avoid having to ban Trump, and you gotta wonder why, right? It turns out the answer is stupidly simple. Trump is worth $2 billion to these fools. $2 billion of their valuation can be directly traced to people who have come in because of Trump, after Trump, and the Nazis. And I get that they need users. I get that they need eyeballs to survive. And the Trump Twitter economy is strong, $2 billion. Don't tell us that. Tell us this is a business decision, a horrible one without any ethics whatsoever attached to it, one that's totally devoid of decency, but a business decision nonetheless. And tell us that you're okay putting us all in danger to save your fucking business. Let's fast forward a few months. By the way, I found this by Googling Mark Zuckerberg looking normal. First image that came up. April 10, 2018, after the Facebook data breach, where Cambridge Analytica swiped about 100 million users' data off the site. And by the way, if they're telling you 100 million, maybe closer to 200 million, okay? Mark Zuckerberg gets pulled in for congressional questioning. And Democratic Congresswoman Anna Eshoo asks him, are you willing to change your business model to protect users' privacy? His reply, Congresswoman, I don't know what that means. And you know what? I believe him. I do. He doesn't know what that means. And that should scare the shit out of you. Twitter and Facebook are fucking atom bombs. And the cuddled runts who run these platforms have no idea how to deal with that. They're scared. And I can't blame them for being scared. If I was in their position, I'd be scared too. But they're also unprincipled. They're making money off of this shit. And that money is more important to them than the well-being of the people using the platform. They lack an ethical core. And I can blame them for that. Because doing the right thing means doing it no matter how scared you might be to do it. Twitter was conceived and built by a room of privileged white boys, some of them my friends, not the one on the right. Check this out. There's more diversity in Martha Stewart's color collection than there is on that fucking couch. Yeah. These guys never considered the possibility that they were building a bomb. And to this day, Jack Dorsey doesn't realize the size of a bomb that he's sitting on. He doesn't believe he has an abuse problem. He doesn't believe he has a harassment problem. He doesn't believe he has a Nazi problem. He believes he has a PR problem. It's not. In this day and age, if you are building a tool with global reach, and who the fuck isn't? Especially a tool in the social space, you simply cannot leave it in the hands of a room full of white boys. Twitter didn't build in a way to deal with harassment, abuse, sexism, or racism. They didn't build those things into the platform because none of the people building the platforms had ever experienced those things. It didn't occur to them. And now, those problems are too big to fix, especially if you don't want to fix them. Remember, Trump is worth $2 billion to these fools. Twitter never saw Donald Trump as a problem because they saw him as the solution. As Upton Sinclair so eloquently put it, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. And that's true. And what's worse, what's really worse, and the reason that I'm up here today talking to all of you, is they couldn't have built any of this shit without us. It's our labor in the products these fools are building. We're the ones who flesh this crap out. We're the ones working our asses off to make these things a reality. We're the ones actually building the bombs for these fools. And when we see the ethical shit show that we're helping to bring into the world, we do nothing. Or worse, we fashion blinders out of stock options and fat paychecks. Well, that's no longer okay. As designers, developers, engineers, or whatever the hell you're calling yourselves these days, you need to realize that there's an ethical component to this thing that we do. And it's more important than ever to exercise that judgment. It's not optional. And it's obviously not something that you can adapt to the ethics of your employer, because it is clear that they do not have any. And it's not something that you can save for a side hustle. Ethics are core. They're core to what we do. They are the foundation of design. They have to be. If you see yourself as a pair of hands, please know that that blood is never going to wash off. Because right now, when I look out at the landscape of how we're spending our time, the precious little time that we have left on this earth, I see platforms that demean women, demean minorities, demean people based on gender, based on creed. I see hate. I see fear. And I see a bunch of rich white boys sliding down this river of toxic sludge all the way to the bank. What I do not see are enough tools to help those in need. What I do not see is a commitment to truth or a commitment to cut down on abuse and harassment. And before we can talk about how to do these things, it appears we still need to convince a lot of people that that's our job. Because I still run into a lot of people who tell me things, but Mike, what do you want me to do, man? I'm just a pair of hands. I just got hired here to do what they tell me to do. Or Mike, dude, I got a mortgage to pay. Or my personal favorite, I'm changing things from the inside, dude. Yeah, I got this. Good luck, little dude. Making a living at the expense of somebody else's humanity is not okay. Paying your bills by making software used to round up immigrants is not okay. Putting food on your table by building tools that protect hate speech is not okay. And knowing this is all not okay, but doing it anyway, turning a blind eye to it, pretending it's not there, well, that's really not okay. Don't ask how you're going to pay your rent working ethically. Ask why you're open to working unethically in the first place. That's the better question. But look, if you're not open to this shit that's going on, if you want to do the right thing, and I sincerely hope you do, if you'd rather spend the precious time that you have on earth helping people, as I sincerely hope you do, we need to band together, because together we have agency. Together we're a force. Together we can do things that we can't do on our own. Because I didn't come here tonight to get you down. I came here to raise you up. I came here to help you understand how powerful we truly are. Since the dawn of humanity, designers have been problem solvers. And these cuddled runts of Silicon Valley want to change the world? Well, we actually have. And it's time that we do it again. And I showed up with tools for you. I have these little ethics books to hand out. Who wants them? Well, come on up. Oh, wait. Did I say just for women? Because they're just for women, because, you know all those times that women are talking and you talk over them, or you take credit for what they're saying? Or, it feels like shit, and that's what it feels like right now in the audience, not getting these. So, the gentlemen in the audience can buy these at designtherightthing.com. Look, I got 10 easy steps to fixing this shit. And they're in the books, and we're going to go over them now. Number 1, a designer is first and foremost a human being. Before you're a designer, you're a human being. And like every other human being on the planet, you are part of the social contract. We share a planet. And everything that we do impacts the people around it. And the effect of what we put into the fabric of society must always be a key consideration of our work. The real question isn't whether something scales. Fuck that. The real question is, how does it impact the people it comes in contact with? Every person on this planet is obligated to do our best to leave this planet in better shape than we found it. Designers do not get to opt out of that. And when you do work that depends on a need for income disparity or class distinctions to succeed, you are failing your job as a human being and therefore as a designer. Number 2. Designers are responsible for the work that they put into the world. You're responsible for the things that go out with your name on it. And while it's certainly impossible to predict how everything you make is going to get used, it shouldn't be a surprise to you when something that's meant to hurt someone actually fulfills that mission. You can't be surprised when a gun we designed to kill someone actually does it. We can't be surprised when a database that we designed to catalog immigrants gets those immigrants deported. And when we knowingly produce work that's intended to harm, we are abdicating our responsibility. And when we ignorantly produce work that harms others because we didn't fully consider the full ramifications of our work, we are doubly guilty. Remember how excited we used to be about the internet? Do you remember those days? Holy shit, we could make anything. We were going to change the world. We were going to create a new economy. We were going to bring down totalitarian governments, and we were going to give that one gay kid in Helena, Montana, somebody to talk to. We had so much processing power at our disposal. We had so much hope. That was the dream. And what did we end up doing with that dream? We built a fucking service economy out of that dream, where by definition, you need a group of poor people and a group of rich people. And the poorer the poor people and the richer the rich people, the better it works. The story of the internet right now is the story of the service economy. It's the story of the haves and the have-nots. It's the story of increasing the difference between the two. It's the story of fucking people over for profit. And this is where Silicon Valley is dumping all of its money right now. We are purposely and knowingly building a society that needs income disparity to exist, and that was not the plan. Let me introduce you to somebody you've probably never heard of, James Lang. James was an engineer at Volkswagen. James designed the software that lied about Volkswagen's emissions when they were being tested. Anybody remember that? He knowingly designed software that skirted regulations. This was fucked. And a court agreed that it was fucked because they sentenced him to jail. James is now doing a 40-month sentence because James was responsible for the work that he made. We can go to jail for this shit now. And frankly, I think it's about time. Because we're not building websites with dancing baby GIFs anymore. We're making things that store people's health records. We're making things that store people's financial info. And maybe the scariest of all, we're building things that manage people's relationships to other people. That shit is hard. That shit is scary. And not only does it take somebody with a technical skill set, it takes somebody with a strong ethical core. And amazingly, they let us do all of this shit without a license, which I think is crazy and needs to change. Number 3, A designer values impact over form. We need to fear the consequences of our work more than we love the cleverness of our ideas. Design does not exist in a vacuum, and society is the biggest system we can impact, and everything that we make is part of that system, good and bad. Last year, the idiots in our government decided to put out an RFP for a border wall. About 12 design agencies in the US replied to this RFP. This one particular one has stores on the main floor, because, you know, that's what the concentration camps were lacking, fucking gift shops. That would have flipped that story. An object that is designed to harm people cannot be said to be well designed, no matter how aesthetically pleasing it might be, because to design it well is to design it to harm others, and we do not harm others. Nothing a totalitarian regime designs is well designed because it has been designed by a totalitarian regime. Anybody here familiar with John Rawls? Did you get a book? No. God damn it. And you know, talk to me after. So dude wrote a book. You're not going to read it. It's 800 pages. But one of the things he talks about in this book is this idea of a veil of ignorance, which is pretty genius. In short, as you're designing society, imagine that your role in that society gets chosen after you've designed it. Not before, after. So you have to design something ignorant of what your role would be. For example, if you're designing a society where slavery is legal, you better be okay being a slave. If you're designing a wall, you better be okay being on either side of that wall. And if you're designing a system for getting people around, you better be okay ending up as the Uber driver in that situation. You think Travis would have made the decisions that he's made at Uber if there was any chance that he would have ended up as a driver? You think he would have made the decisions that he made at Uber if there was any chance he might have ended up as a woman in the back of one of those vehicles? Both of these idiots would have designed their products differently if there was any chance they could have ended up in our positions instead of theirs. And that is not principled. That's not ethical. That is wrong. Number 4, designers owe those who hire them not just their labor, but their counsel. When you get hired to design something, you're hired for your expertise. Your job is not just to produce work, but to evaluate the impact of that work. Your job is to relay the impact of that work to your client or your employer. And should that impact be negative, should you find out that you're actually building a bomb, it's your job to raise a flag. And if it's impossible to eliminate the negative impact of that work, it's your job to keep that work from seeing the light of day. You're not just hired to dig a ditch. You're hired to evaluate the economic, the sociological, the ecological impacts of that ditch. And if that ditch fails those tests, it's your job to break the shovels. A designer uses their expertise in the service of others without being a servant. Saying no is a design skill. Asking why is the greatest design skill. Rolling your eyes is not a design skill. Asking ourselves why we are making something is an infinitely better question than asking ourselves whether we can make it. Number 5, A designer welcomes criticism. No code of ethics should protect your work from criticism, be it from clients, be it from the public, be it from other designers. Instead, you should encourage criticism to get better at the shit you do. If your work is so fragile that it can't stand up to somebody criticizing, it shouldn't exist. And the time to kick the tires on something you do comes way before those tires hit the road. And be open to that criticism coming from anywhere. The role of criticism, when given appropriately, is to evaluate and improve your work. It's a gift. It's a gift that we can give each other. This work sucks is like a magnificent Christmas present that you can find under your tree every morning at work. Hand it out. It keeps bad work from seeing the light of day. Maybe find a nicer way to say it, but you get my point. And you know what? For the record, Jack Dorsey has not thanked me for my criticism, which I think is a little rude. Number 6, a designer strives to know their audience. Design is the intentional solution to a problem within a set of constraints. To know whether you've properly solved those problems, you got to meet the people who are actually having them. And if you're part of a team, your team should look like those people. The more a team, right? Right? Guess who they're solving problems for? The more your team can look like the people who you're solving problems for, the more thoroughly you can actually solve those problems. A team that can come at problems from different points of view, from different backgrounds, from different experiences, from different sets of needs. A team with a single point of view is never going to understand the constraints they need for their design to be as well as a team with multiple points of view. You know, there's a myth out there that you build the tool your team wants to use. Anybody ever hear of this? Oh my God, really? So what happens when your team is all this guy? Guess what? In Silicon Valley, your team is all that guy. You got to get out there and you got to meet the people whose problems you're solving. You got to find out what those problems actually are. And look, I could go the route of making the business case for this. I'm sure you've heard it before. Like, why would you ignore 50% of all your possible users? Why would you leave 50% of your profit on the table? Why would you ignore the buying power of women? Why would you ignore the buying power of minorities? Why would you ignore the buying power of gays? Yada, yada, yada. But quite honestly, I am really tired of money and profit being the reason why we sometimes end up doing the right thing. If we're saying we should take women seriously because of their buying power, well, what does that say about refugees? What does that say about undocumented immigrants? What does that say about children? We need to value human life, all human life, because it's human life, not because it's a potential profit center. We need to stop thinking about people as consumers and start thinking of them as fellow human beings. Number 7, a designer does not believe in edge cases. When you decide who you're designing for, you're making an implicit statement about who you're not designing for. And for years, we referred to these people, people who weren't crucial to our product's success, as edge cases. We were marginalizing people. And we were making a decision that there were people in the world whose problems weren't worth solving. Facebook now claims to have 2 billion users. I think about 1 million of those are Russian bots, by the way, but that's neither here nor there. 1%, by the way, 1% of 2 billion users, and most products would consider 1% an edge case. Who figured it out? Come on. What? 20 million. 20 million people. Those are the people at the margins. Those are the trans people who get caught on the edges of real names projects. Those are the single moms who get caught on the edges of both parents must sign permission slips. Those are the elderly immigrants who show up at polling places and can't get ballots in their native tongues. These are not edge cases. These are human beings. And we owe them most of all, our best work. Number 8, a designer is part of a professional community. And the way that you do your job and the way that you handle yourself professionally affects everyone in that community. Just as a rising tide lifts all boats, taking a shit in the pool affects all the swimmers. I got you laughing again. And all it took was a poop joke. If you are dishonest with a client or an employer, the designer behind you pays that bill. If you do not hold your ground on doing bad work, the designer behind you is going to have to work twice as hard to make up for it. And as a professional community, we got to get our asses organized, because I have to believe that there are designers at Facebook and designers at Twitter who want to do the right thing. And when they take a stand, when they finally walk out, praise Jesus, I wish they would finally walk out. I want them to know that as a community, we're backing them up. No one does that work. And if they get fired, no one takes those jobs. Number 9, a designer welcomes a diverse and competitive field. You know, throughout your entire career, you should be seeking to learn. I'm pretty old now, and I think I've been learning backwards, because when I was 20, I knew everything. And now that I'm 50, I realize I don't know much. And I think that's really this thing they call wisdom, is realizing how stupid you actually are, which is great. That means confronting all of the things that I now have to admit I don't know. That means listening to other people's experiences. That means welcoming and encouraging people who come from different places than I do, who have different cultures, who have different backgrounds. That means making space at the table for people that society has historically kept down. And we have to make space for traditionally marginalized voices to be heard in this profession. Check it out. When the Yale men's crew team has more women on it than your women's summit panel, you have fucked up. Diversity is not just something that you check off a list. It actually leads to better work. Those dumb butts at Twitter, 4 white boys around a table building an atom bomb. If there had been different people in that room, they would have looked for shit and built it into the tool, shit that's still not there. Diversity leads to better design, and it could have saved our asses. Twitter didn't deal with harassment and abuse because no one on their team had ever experienced these things. Facebook had to walk back their real names policy once they were confronted with the fact that there are people out there who can't use their real names or whose governments don't recognize their real names. And yeah, they eventually fixed it. They rolled it back, but had they talked to, or better yet, hired some of these people, they might have avoided the problem altogether. Oh, what about empathy, Mike? Our company's real big into empathy. We just had an empathy workshop last week. Guess what? Empathy is a pretty word for exclusion. If you want to know how women would use something, get a woman on the team that's designing it. They're not extinct. It's not like we have to study women like baked in amber to know how they would think. You can actually go hire them and put them on your fucking team. And finally, number 10. Blessed be a designer takes time for self-reflection. Because, you know, nobody wakes up one day deciding to throw their ethics out the window. It happens slowly. It happens one slippery slope at a time. It's a series of small decisions that might even seem fine at the time. But before you know it, you're making excuses for why you won't kick Nazis off your platform. Jack Dorsey didn't wake up one day thinking, I know, I'll build a bomb. Yeah. It happened slowly. And there are several reasons why it happened. But I can tell you that there are several points where it could have been stopped, but Twitter chose to ignore those. Some of it was out of ignorance. The company didn't employ the type of people who could have seen the signs, but you can only use ignorance as an excuse once. And some of it was out of greed. Remember, Trump is a $2 billion business to these idiots. And since these problems have been around for a long time, I have no choice but to believe Twitter is working exactly the way they want it to work. So please, take the time for self-reflection every few months. Evaluate the decisions that you've made recently. Are you staying true to the person you are, to the person you've always wanted to be? Or are you slowly moving those ethical goalposts a few yards at a time with each raise, with each stock option award? Have you veered off course? Correct it. Is your workplace an unethical hellmouth? A job is a choice. Make another choice. Look, I started this talk by giving Twitter a lot of shit, and to be fair, they deserve all of it. But let me be really clear on why. There was a time when I thought Twitter was great. It truly was, and some of you may even remember that time. Most of the people I know, I met on Twitter. The fact that I'm standing here in front of you right now probably has something to do with something I said on Twitter at one point. I learned how to be a better writer on Twitter. And I get that I was really privileged to be able to do those things because every time that I tweeted, even something incendiary, nobody threatened to kill or rape me. But there are a lot of people for who that experience is the norm. And Twitter, by doing very, very little about it, have shown that they're okay with that being the norm. I don't hate Twitter as much as I mourn it. I still think of what it was and what it could have been had it been in the hands of people who actually cared, who actually wanted to do the right thing. And then I think of all the people whose voices have been silenced through the years. And I care about them more. Twitter's sins are twofold. Their origin story, like many origin stories in the Valley, emerge from a monoculture. People who come from too similar a background and the same experiences, designing a tool for a world that's so much more diverse than they are, without taking the experiences of that diverse world into account. White boys will always solve problems for white boys first and at other people's expenses. Their second sin was capitalism itself. Twitter is a product of a system that rewards growth above all things, because the people who put their money in need to get their money back times 10. And capitalism reduces people down to assets. You're not a human being, you're fuel. You're fuel for their odious machine. So whether you're coming to the platform to have a civil chat, or because you're freaking out that the President of the United States is going to start a nuclear war, it doesn't matter. You're coming. You're coming. And if giving you all panic attacks to make you come more often, we're happy to market those panic attacks right back to you. We got to make money. We are all going to die. This is known. I hope this isn't a surprise to anybody in this room. Not today, not tomorrow, hopefully not for a very long time, but we are all at some point going to die. So we have a very limited amount of time on this planet to leave a mark. Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg have left their mark, and history is going to judge them accordingly. But what I want you to think about before you die, a very long time from now, is what kind of mark you want to leave. Do you want to whittle your days away making idiotic boy children rich while they silence the people who need you the most? Or do you want to earn that death by using your skills to help those that need you? So before I leave, I want to remind you of three very important things. I want you to remember that you are free people, free to choose how you spend the time you have on this earth. And I implore you to use that time in the interest of making other people free. If you want to change how the world is designed, you have to change not just how we're designing it, but who is designing it. I want you to remember that you are lucky. You are lucky that the world has been designed more or less in your favor. Some of you more lucky than others, I see that, but you have homes, you have food on your table, you have jobs, you can come to events like this and see idiots like me. And that luck carries with it the responsibility to help others who weren't so lucky. But most of all, I want you to remember that you are more than designers. You are human beings. You are ordinary people bound by the same social contract as every other glorious human being on this planet, and that our job is to help and elevate each other. And ordinary people like us, we do not build bombs. Thank you.